All good, thank you. All right. Make sure the recording is started. So in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's spiritual connection to country and in continuing ACU's commitment to reconciliation, it is customary to acknowledge country as we pass through. Today, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the First Peoples, the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways. We thank them for the continued custodianship. We acknowledge and celebrate the continuation of a living culture that has a unique role in this region and across all campuses of Australian Catholic University. We also acknowledge elders past and present and thank them for their wisdom and guidance as we walk in their footsteps. So to kick this off, welcome. So today we have the final year review milestone for Roberta, Pires, Vasconcellos. Today the chair is Associate Professor Teresa Dickey. The expert panel is Professor Susie Edwards from ILSTE and also Professor Joseph Sirocci from IPPE. On Roberta's HDR panel is Dr. Taryn Sanders, who gives his apologies due to the birth of his daughter 2 days ago. And in his place, we also have Dr. Mike Notel, who is proxying as one of the supervisors, and also apologies from Professor Chris Lonsdale and Professor Phil Parker. So without any further ado, I'm going to share the screen for Roberta's presentation and let her go.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here, for supporting me in this big accomplishment. And let's get started. So my thesis is about understanding the effects of electronic screens on children and adolescents' socio-emotional well-being. So just giving you a background about my topic. So especially for those who are parents here, like we see screens everywhere. Like we have our children surrounded by screens all the time, even like for doing homework for school, like for learning purposes, or for entertainment, for gaming, for watching TV, or doing any kind of entertainment activities in screens, for socializing with friends or family or relatives online on social media, and also to like feed their curiosity about topics that are interesting to them, or even for learning like new skills, such as like learning how to play guitar in online tutorials, this kind of thing. So everything they can do, and they actually do, surrounded by and on screens. And there's no way back to the past. Like there's no way that screens are going away anytime soon. So we need to learn how to live and how to lead our children in this new environment. So because of these, like such pervasive presence of screens in these days, screens have become like the biggest concerns that parents have about their children, mental health, emotional health, and behavior. And this is because there's a lot of like sayings and evidence about the negative impacts that screens may have on their children's emotional well-being, for example, like how kids are getting depressed or anxious because they cannot leave a smartphone, they cannot stop playing video games, they keep continuously asking to be on screens all the time. And because of screens, they are like showing conduct problems, aggressive behaviors, like they are replicating what they see on violent contents on screens. And violent contents for most of the parents are like the biggest villains of screens these days. And also social media, like especially for the older ones, like pre-adolescents, adolescents are more likely to engage in social media, and parents are more concerned about their interactions online. And also because like there is evidence out there saying that screen time is displacing some protective behaviors for children's overall well-being, such as sleeping or practicing physical activity, or even interacting with parents, with other siblings, with friends, doing something else outside of screens. But we don't know exactly if they are not doing physical activity or sleeping enough time or interacting with other people because of screens, or if they are using screens more and more because they don't have other options, other things to do. And this depends very much on like how parents are approaching this problem. So talking about like thinking about different kinds of interactions with screens. If you see these pictures here, you can see like very negative types of interactions, right? So looking at social media, playing alone, like the parents not each of those parents like looking to their own smartphones while the child is watching TV. So we cannot see like a good environment or a good positive interaction in these examples here. However, we can also think about like positive interactions with screens. So something that can bring some benefits for the kids, like playing with parents, playing video games with your children may nurture them somehow and help them like feel good, feel happy, and live a better life. Think more, need supported. So we can see some kinds of like positive interactions with screens. So can we say that all types of electronic screens interactions are bad or harmful for our kids? Or is there any possibility that this is more like a causal relationship? So the interactions with screens can lead children to poor socio-emotional well-being, or maybe kids with poor socio-emotional well-being or socio-emotional problems may be more likely to use screens or overuse screens because of this pre-existing condition. So my thesis will address these problems. And the three main things that made it difficult to say that this is a causal relationship or not are listed there. So the first one is the prevalence of cross-sectional studies. Like there are some longitudinal studies available there, but not many meta-analysis investigating this causal link. So my first study was a meta-analysis of longitudinal studies to investigate this relationship between screen time and socio-emotional problems in children. Because there is one other meta-analysis there about adolescents, there was some lacking evidence in the child population. My study 2 is about the unreliability, like trying to address the problem of self-reported measures of screen time. Almost 100% of screen time research is made using self-reported measures of screen time. But it's very hard for us to collect self-reported information about screen time. You have kids, Karen? Teresa, you have kids. Can you tell me like how much TV they watched, your kids watched the last week?
Yes.
You can? They have very strict screen time limits.
They're still very small.
Right? Yeah. But as they grow older, it gets harder and harder to control. So for some parents, and it's very hard to tell like how much screen time they had last week. And it's also very hard to say like we cannot stay all the time with them. We should. The time they are watching TV or playing video games, we should be with them, at least surrounding them to monitor like what they are watching, who they are talking with. So it's very hard to control this. But the self-reported measures cannot tell us like if they were watching educational content, violent content, which type of content they were watching. So it's very hard to trust in self-reported measures. And this is what led me to my study 2. I will investigate these associations in the longitudinal study using wearable cameras, because like this will give me more accurate and precise information about screen time. And my third study, I will address the problems like these uncertainties about what causes what. Is it screen time that causes socio-emotional problems, or is there any reversal relationship, like trying to understand this reversal relationship, especially because like self-reported measures don't give you precise information. It's hard to use like more complex analysis when you don't have precise information about some phenomena. So having these more precise information, I will try to understand why the screens are so attractive and so interesting for kids, much more interesting than everything else, perhaps everything else. So my first study, as I said, is a meta-analysis, and my research questions, I will try to understand, like to confirm if screen time leads to socio-emotional problems or if socio-emotional problems lead to screen time use, and what aspects of screen time, like types of screens, if it's like television viewing, gaming, or educational content, what type of aspects of screens will be more important or more influence more this relationship. So I collected information from meta-analyzed information from 94 studies, and there were the period, longitudinal period in these papers varied from 6 months to 15 years, but most of them were between 1 and 2 years. And in my overall sample, I had almost 200,000 children, 43% were girls, and 100% of screen time measures in these longitudinal studies were self-reported. About 70% of studies from these 94 investigated the relationship between like the predicting effects of screens on socio-emotional problems, and only 30% of them addressed the reverse relationship. And I used a two-stage hierarchical structural equation modeling to analyze this information. So in the path analysis, looking at the results of the path analysis for these interactions, I could observe that screens really like lead children to more socio-emotional problems, but the reverse causation is also true, and it's a little bit stronger than the first one. So this is something that we really need to address. So just digging a little bit more in these data, I did some moderation analysis for gender and for age between younger and older children, and also for type of device, if it was like a tablet, computer, or game console, and content, or violent content, educational content, different types of content, and purpose of screen use, level of exposure at screen time. And for these, I used like the screen time guideline recommendations for each specific age. So until 5, no more than 1 hour, less than 0 screen time, and from 5 to 12, no more than 2 hours a day. So these were the limits I used to classify between excessive or not excessive screen use. And also for the nature of socio-emotional problems, if they were more like externalizing problems or internalizing problems. For the screen content and purpose, and yeah, these two actually, I did not decide it myself if it was violent or not violent. I used, for those studies who provided any specification, if it was violent or educational, I used their specification. When it was not provided, I just had it as like general screen use of general content, general purposes. So for the first associations, like screen time predicting socio-emotional problems, the biggest moderator was video games. Like when kids use screens for playing video games, the effects were like increased by 3 times. It was like 0.8, 0.08 for the overall one, but 0.3, 3.2, 3.4 for this one. So it's really more impacting than just using screens in general. So we need to pay attention when our kids are playing video games and see what they are playing, with who they are playing. And also like the excessive screen time, like exceeding the limits for their specific age, also was more strongly associated with more social problems. And finally, in terms of the nature of socio-emotional problems, there was no like big relationship between screens and internalizing problems. But yes, there are some stronger relationship when it comes to aggressive behavior, conductive problems, attention problems. So it's more likely to make those children more displaying more externalizing behaviors. There was no moderating effects, like meaningful moderating effects for gender, age, type of device, and screen content. But in this case, this is something interesting, not being moderated by content, because like there's no stronger evidence for violent content leading to stronger or to more socio-emotional problems. Any type of content, general content, can lead to socio-emotional problems if exceeding the screen time limits. So there's no reason to be too much like pressured or concerned about our kids using violent games. I'm not saying that you should encourage them to use like violent content, to watch violent content on screen, but this is not really a big deal. So we can relax a little bit in terms of violent content. For the reverse relationship, I could observe like the evidence show that like older children who present like pre-existing socio-emotional problems will be more likely to engage in screen time than the younger ones. It may be for a range of factors. It may be for parenting style. It may be for lack of autonomy or too much autonomy to choose what to do. A lot of things that may be influencing these results. About the screen time, the screen content, again, it was like kids with socio-emotional problems, they will be more likely to engage in any type of screens, not just violent, for example. Again, there was no stronger evidence for violent content related to kids presenting aggressive behavior, for example. Yes, sir?
I understand that you look. Do you mind my asking a question?
No, it's okay.
Surely maybe there was a more complicated interaction so that the type of content and the interaction between the type of content and the type of outcome. So did you look at violent content with externalizing behaviors?
Not a specific violent content because
there weren't enough studies to.
Yes,
that.
yes, it
That's
was very.
Yeah.
I used some filters, and like for some associations, I couldn't really test it before.
That seems to me there's surprising finding. Was that surprising to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, just continuing. Again, gaming was the biggest problem, and this time was even stronger, not 0.3, but 0.4. The effect for screens, socio-emotional problems, leading kids to use more screens. So this is like the cherry on the top. When kids are feeling frustrated or when kids are feeling emotionally impaired, they are more likely to use games to deal with this kind of distressing feelings. And again, it's an excessive screen time. So kids with socio-emotional problems are more likely to overuse or maybe become compulsive users of screens. And this is something that we need to take care of. And again, gender and type of device were not like moderators in this relationship. And the nature of socio-emotional problems was not like a stronger moderator as well. Like kids using screens are more likely to present externalizing behavior, but the reverse is not true. Like any type of socio-emotional problems will lead children to use or overuse screens. So the key findings of my meta-analysis, the main finding is that this relationship is reciprocal. So there's no just one-way street, it's both ways. And the biggest concern should be gaming behavior. So we will try to understand a little bit following this study. I will try to show you how we can deal with this problem and what's going on. And the excessive screen time was also a big problem. We didn't test for the mediation of like some protective factors such as sleep and physical activity. So it might be related to this, but we didn't have this information in the meta-analysis. There was no indication of a stronger effect of violent content. So we cannot say that screens are making kids more aggressive or with less attention. There might be something else out there that is making kids act this way. So other factors that need to be addressed in future researches. And the effects of time, for example, with the time passing, kids are more likely to use screens and more likely to get more socio-emotional problems. And we know that older children and adolescents engage more in social media, but we didn't have enough studies to test for this hypothesis, so we cannot provide this information. So just to give you to wrap up the first study and lead me to the second study, as I showed you, 100% of longitudinal studies in screen time used self-reported measures. So in my second study, I'm using wearable cameras to investigate screen time, because we cannot compare apples and bananas, right? We cannot compare. We just saw that gaming is different than watching television, and there are different types of interactions with screens. So we need to be the more precise as possible to be able to bring up like stronger conclusions, to draw stronger conclusions about this relationship. So in my study 2, I will investigate if the longitudinal associations between screen use and socio-emotional problems will be confirmed when using more accurate screen time measures using wearable cameras. Using wearable cameras, I will be able not to identify like the time kids are exposed to screens, but also like the type of content they are watching and in which context they are using screens. If they are doing this at home, at school, or not at school because we're not collecting information at school, sorry. But if they are doing this with parents, with siblings, or alone, or in different types of environments. For my second study, I will use data from a large research project, which is like the Square Eyes or All Eyes, Understanding Children's Exposure to Screens. This is an ARC project led by Chris Lonsdale and the MLB team. It's a longitudinal study in children aged 7 to 10 years at baseline, and I will investigate if these relationships, these associations are maintained when using wearable cameras. And in this study, I will be able to investigate the mediating relationship of mediating effect of sleep and physical activity in this relationship. So for the data collection procedures, we asked our participants to use a wearable camera just like that for 3 weekdays and 1 weekend day. And to protect their data, to make sure that no one would be able to access that information, we use like encrypted SD cards, and only our research team can access this information. So just to protect their privacy and for ethical reasons, obviously. And also other thing that we tried to control was like parents didn't know about what we were observing. They didn't know about like that this study was about screen time, because this could change their parenting style during the days that kids were using the camera. So they think it's about everything kids do during the day, not specifically about screen time. And also to protect their privacy, we used a computer-based model to blur all the faces so no one could be recognized. And we just used those images that parents allowed it. Like after collecting the data, we uploaded the data at the participant's house, and the parents would be like the first people to see the images. And if they wanted some image to be deleted, we didn't even see the image. Like everything was done using a computer-based program, and everything was removed before we could even see it. And we also collected physical activity and sleep data using accelerometers. And for my study specifically, I used the quality of life inventory to test for socio-emotional well-being. So before COVID, our original plan was to collect data in schools. But with the lockdown restrictions, we need to change our approach. And instead of collecting data from schools and collecting data from 30 kids at the same day, we are doing one by one. We are visiting participants at their places 2 times, one to drop off the equipment, and after 10 days to pick up the equipment and to download the images. So it increased, like really impacted our capacity to collect data. Then because of that, instead of like the original plan was to have collected data from 300 participants at this point, but we were able to collect just 25%. So instead of having 300 participants, now we have 100. So my initial plan for this study was to have a sample of 200 children, but instead now I'm expecting to have just about 50 of them. I will still be able to do a 1-year follow-up study, but with a much smaller sample. So the images, because we had the baseline data collection a year ago, we are already like coding the images for this study, and we are using a computer-based model to detect the images, and then research assistant are like doing the work of coding these images. Like after the screen time, screens are detected in the images, they are classifying the images into type of device, content, purpose, or context, physical and social context, using this coding framework that was developed and approved, tested, and approved to be used for screen time research. At this point, we have data coded for 28 children, and because of the sample size that was reduced, I decided to use a Bayesian multiple regression instead of structural equation modeling. Because of the sample, I haven't yet decided the priors, which priors I will be using for this analysis. It's still to be confirmed. And the mediation analysis to investigate the mediating effects of physical activity and sleep. So for this study, I'm planning, I will wait until April to see how many kids I will have at this point, and then analyze the data in May to like finalize this study before my current deadline for my thesis submission. Just again, that's my study 2. Okay, so just moving to my third study, again recalling my meta-analysis results, because this was like the base for my third study, the evidence that I collected from my first one. So we observed that the gaming is the big deal, like the game is the big villain. Instead of violent content, gaming is the biggest problem. And we also know that excessive gaming will be leading our children to more socio-emotional problems. But what are the mechanisms behind this? We still don't know. And we didn't collected information, and we didn't found any evidence for social media, but we know that adolescents use more social media than kids and children. And as they grow older, they are more likely to have socio-emotional problems, they are more likely to use social media, and this may be like a big problem. So I will try to understand, why does it happen? What makes digital screens so attractive to children and adolescents? For this study, I used the basic, the self-determination theory as a fundamental, like a base for my, to defining my hypothesis. So one of the theories that I used was the basic psychological needs, that says that people need to have 3 basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness, nurtured or met, to be able to have, like, to improve their overall well-being. And there are 2 spectrums that are related to this theory, like the need satisfaction where a person might be less satisfied or more satisfied with these attending these needs, but also to the other side, where not low satisfied but frustrated instead. So it has a stronger impact in their overall well-being. And looking at this perspective, like this theory, I am hypothesizing that like the need frustration in life, if in screens people feel like very satisfied when using screens, this interaction between need frustration and need satisfaction may lead them to a compulsive use. And this is something that is like already evidence, and it's part of this theory. And I will try to investigate if screen use behavior might be driven for a similar mechanism. So this is my third study, like moderating effects of general need frustration on the association between screens and socio-emotional problems among adolescents. In this study, I used adolescents because it was like hard to collect information from children, especially online, and I needed to like the ethics. We would need parental consent. It would make everything harder to collect data from children. So I decided to do this with adolescents. And I also used two other hypotheses that are like part of the self-determination theory as well. The first one is the need density hypothesis, which talks about like the satisfaction of needs. So looking at video games, for example, video games are like well-designed. Video games are told to really satisfy the gamer users' needs and makes them feel better and attain some of those like the competence, the autonomy, and relatedness basic needs. And if they feel like they have like a very poor life or feel very thwarted in their general life, this may lead to compulsive gaming. And looking at this need substitute hypothesis, when the people feel like very frustrated in life and like these screens do not really satisfy them. But we know that a lot of like adolescents, they feel frustrated looking to social media. They feel so inadequate. They feel so miserable looking at other people's life, but they still continue using and looking at social media. They can't take their eyes from the smartphone. Why? It's not satisfying their needs, but they continue looking at social media and engaging in social media. So we will try to look to this phenomena from the perspective of the need substitute hypothesis, which says that there might be other factors leading them to overuse social media. And in this case, I will test for the effect of extrinsic versus intrinsic aspirations in life. Either way, any kind of compulsive behavior and external extrinsic aspirations in life, they are thought to be related to socio-emotional problems. So my hypothesis was tested using this moderated mediation analysis, investigating the relationship between need satisfaction in screens, predicting socio-emotional problems, but mediated by this compulsive screen use behavior. And I will also test the moderating effects of need frustration in life and life aspirations. So I collected, as I said, online, the information online, and the follow-up was a 6 month follow-up. So I used basic psychological need satisfaction and frustration scales to investigate the need satisfaction and need frustration in general life. Instead of collecting information of how much time they use screens, I collected information about social media disorder using the social media disorder scale and internet gaming disorder scale. And finally, the strengths and difficulty questionnaire to assess their socio-emotional well-being. Well, for this study, in November 2022, just after my mid-candidature review, I collected data from about 400 participants using a recruitment agents that helped me recruiting participants and collecting data online. However, in May, 6 months later, when it was time to collect the follow-up data, they lost contact with all my participants. they changed some things in their operational system and they lost contact with everyone. So I had no data. And then I needed to do a fresh sample. And I then collected data from almost 15,000 participants because like the retention rate was expected to be very low. And I used validity checks and attention checks to check the quality of these data, because some people just do these online surveys like they don't even read it. And I just embedded some interesting questions in the surveys. And then I ran a filter to remove all those participants who clearly were not like playing goodwill and was just like doing it anyways, like in less than 6 minutes. And I did it many, many times. It was impossible to do complete the survey in less than 6 minutes. So all of them who completed the survey in less than 6 minutes were removed. So my final baseline sample was 880 participants. And we are still collecting, because of these like big problem with the recruitment agents, we are still collecting my study 3 follow-up data, and we'll finish next month. So right now we have 158 participants, but just 102 passed the validity checks. So it's clearly like a very retention rate, very low retention rate. There is not much I can do about this. With the data I have so far, I ran the moderated mediation analysis, and what I could observe that is quite interesting is that like in general, like screen use in general, any levels of need frustration in life will lead to greater socio-emotional problems. So the effects were meaningful even for low levels of need frustration in life and average levels of need frustration in life. Oops, what happened? However, when the kids, like the adolescents, were highly frustrated in life, this effect was much stronger. And there was like a significant difference between low levels of need frustration and higher levels of need frustration. So compulsive use mediated about 51% of this relationship, and confirming the need density hypothesis that like those who are need frustrated in life, highly need frustrated in life, but who feel very satisfied using screens will be more likely to become compulsive users. And then I tested for the effects for electronic gaming and social media separately. And I could, I could observe like the need frustration, the interaction between need frustration and need satisfaction was much stronger for electronic gaming than for social media, but for different reasons. For electronic gaming, there was not big difference between like low levels of need satisfaction compared to high levels of low levels of need frustration compared to high levels of need frustration. And for social media, this variation between the levels of need frustration in life really impacted like the final result. So it says that electronic gaming is more about need satisfaction in screens that lead to compulsive use, while in social media use is more likely to need frustration in life that leads adolescents to overuse social media. And I will, after that, I will try to understand like how the extrinsic aspirations, which role the extrinsic aspirations and intrinsic aspirations play in these associations. But I haven't had a chance to look at this yet. Go. So my next step for this study is to test for the moderating effects of intrinsic aspirations and extrinsic aspirations as a moderator of this relationship. My expected finish date for this study now is to finalize it, complete the follow-up data in March, and then analyze the data just in the sequence and finalize the study in May. So this is my current deadline. I have 4 months to complete my study 2 and my study 3 and my thesis, which is very short time period of time. this is why I requested an extension to try to have more time and collect more data and make my sample and my results more robust, to having more kids in my study 2 and more time to wait for more participants in my study 3. And then if that's approved, that will be my how we'll finish my thesis. So I have just listed some like takeaway messages here for policymakers, but the main things are like there's a need to refine current screen time guidelines, because it's not just about time, but about what kids are doing on screens. But most importantly, it's necessary to provide parents, like to support parents in guiding their children for healthier screen time habits based on what's being suggested here. So making sure that like parents, we cannot tell parents to encourage children to do more physical activity or social interactions if they are not supported to provide that, like by governmental institutions. So they need to surround all parents' needs and make sure that they will be able to do their job, actually. And also allocate fundings for more studies that will investigate this causal relationship, because it's very hard to do screen time research. It's very expensive, especially if you are going to use like wearable cameras. It's easier to do it using self-reported measures, but it's harder and more expensive to like using devices, specific devices, and taking all care needed to guarantee the participants' privacy and everything else. So it needs to be support and fund these kind of initiatives. And for parents, like and for me as well, for us parents, the main takeaway messages for me are like, again, it's not all about time, but trying to prioritize like more active interactions with screens and more enriching interaction with screens. Always monitor their environment, like just setting a time, limiting time for screen use. It's not enough. You need to know what they are watching, what they are seeing, what kind of content is being displayed, and what kind of interactions. If they are playing, they can be playing like very pro-social games, but like if the child in the other side of the screen is like treating them badly, they may replicate that behavior. And it's not because of the content, it's because of the interaction with other kids. So we really need to be looking at this kind of signs. And also take advantage of screen use if they love it so much. And we used to love this when we were kids, right? Like I used to love to play Atari. It's like a very different kind of video game, but that was what we had at that time. But I know like that I like it when I was a child, and I know that I can just bring some of my past experiences to bond with my kids, and all parents can do that. And this is an opportunity like to do something they like that is interesting for them, to straight this relationship, like parent and child relationships. And as always, not just because we live in this screen time, we need to make sure that our kids have enough sleep, do physical activities regularly, and have as much social interactions as possible to protect them, to make them feel good, and to lead them to a better overall well-being. And encourage your child to explore other interests and hobbies, and value their interests. If, for example, a child likes playing guitar and wants to learn playing guitar, and like the tutorials are online, what's the problem of watching more than 1 hour or more than 2 hours if they are doing something they love, something they are passionate about, and that is not going to make any bad to them. So we need to, each child is different, and as parents, we are the best person like to know if their interaction with screens is doing great, like doing good or bringing any benefits for them, or harming their emotional well-being. So that's our job after all. And that's me. Thank you very much for being here and supporting me. I just wanted to thank my supervisors, Taryn, Chris, Phil, and Michael. I know they are not here today. And also James, who is not like formally my supervisor, but was with me for the last months of this journey. And it was a very hard one, as those like sand tracks there. And but it was like very valuable and amazing learning experience. And I don't think I could be in a better place, in better hands than I am. And I feel very grateful for that. Thank you, Mike, you were there, and James. And also thank you for my family. My husband and my kids.
Thank you, Roberta. So I'll just hand over to the chair, facilitate the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you very much for this interesting and very engaging presentation. It was a pleasure to watch and to witness. And I'd like to now hand over for questions, and I'd like the panel to go first. And so, Joseph, you've got your hand up. Why don't you just go?
Yes. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Roberta, first of all, I mean, congratulations on continuing to be really positive and persisting in this process to what I would only describe as the kind of some of the worst disasters I could possibly imagine in a PhD. But you somehow have gotten it to the point where you're going to, you're going to finish and you've stayed positive. So well done with that. And so a lot of this will be about kind of adapting to these disasters, isn't it? And so the first thing I want to raise is I wonder if your ambitious statistical goals for study 2 are too ambitious now, like mediation and moderation on a N of 50. Do you think that maybe some of those hypotheses could be pulled back and maybe you could focus on things that can be answered with a small sample?
Yeah, I would probably need to adapt this analysis for like thinking about the sample size. But for my thesis study, actually, but this study will be like, what I mean, I will wait for the whole sample, like to increase the sample size to be able to run a very like structured analysis. For my thesis, I will probably need to adapt it. But then if possible, I'm planning to run like the full analysis when I get to the point, like when I have more data collected.
But you're looking at maybe having 50 people for your dissertation.
Yes.
See, I mean, I think there might be more basic questions you can clearly address, like this kind of use of imagery is an interesting one because, they did this in social psychology and it turned out that just seeing what people were doing just visually didn't provide much information. I'm not saying that's true here, but like, for example, if you counted the number of times people smiled, it wouldn't necessarily indicate whether they were socially skilled because it was contextually bound. It depended on why they were smiling. Were they smiling because they were bullying? So the function of the behavior was really important. And I wonder, is there a simpler question in here about like the information you get from the photographs versus the other stuff you're gathering and how it might be different sources of information? And a lot of times the objective stuff is seen as the right one or the valid one, but it does miss out on function. It does miss out on what is the purpose of that behavior.
Yeah, we cannot really say that, mainly because like the kids will be wearing the camera on the chest and we will not see the kids. We will see what they have in front of them. So it's very hard to tell like their own status or,
Did you measure you measured self-report with the camera stuff?
Yes, we did.
Okay, I'm wondering if you just talking about those different sources of rating and looking at the data and what is the best predictor.
Yeah, but the problem is that this is Bridget's thesis. So Bridget tested these interactions already.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying though, Joseph, that like running a mediation, especially like a moderated mediation with 50 people, is just almost meaningless, right? Because like that, like it would have to be an insane effect size
Yeah.
in order for it to be like significant. I guess like what Roberta's trying to say is that there's two tasks here. One is like get the thesis, and the second one is like publish this in a really good journal.
Yeah.
And
yeah, absolutely.
we're going to wait for the publish it in a really good journal part once we have the full sample of like rough, ideally like between 200 and 400 people. And if she simplifies her hypotheses, as you say, using some Bayesian models with some maybe more strong priors than would be in like a published paper. If things aren't sort of significant, it's like, I guess our take would be that is showing Roberta's capability to answer a question with the data that's available given the context.
Okay, yeah. So
right?
just demonstrating that she can do this and ask the
Yeah.
right question and recognize the limit. I guess, yeah, that's true. You could, if you just demonstrate it. I mean, do you put that part into the people who review the thesis that there were these issues, or is it meant to just go in as if there were no issues? You know what I mean? Do you explain it to the?
Look,
didn't really-
I think that would be my take, is that this is part of a 5-year ARC project, and this is the things as of a time stamp, which is sort of like halfway through our recruitment process. Do you know what I mean? With like 1 year follow-up. You know, because you can't do a PhD 3-week PhD in a 5-year project. That's
fair enough. Fair enough.
All right, I think we can have that discussion online at some point, offline at some point. And Susie, do you have any questions?
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, gracious Roberta, I loved reading your work so much, and then you come along with this powerful presentation, and I love the way that you presented your ideas and used a mixture of infographics and everything to really clearly convey what you were trying to do in the 3 studies. So thank you very much. I just enjoyed the paper and the presentation so very much. I really, really like the first study, the systematic review of the literature. I think that's going to make a very, very significant contribution to the discussion around screen time and how it contributes to, we call it SEL, social and emotional learning in early childhood. And I'm really hoping you get that published, because we'll be doing an update of the Statement on Young Children and Digital Technology in the next 12 to 18 months. So I really want that work there. So I did want to say that, and how much we'll be looking forward to that. I guess my main question is because and just the way you've overcome all the odds too. Just hats off to you. Good on you. Just the sheer tenacity is just wonderful. Probably my main question was, so the goal of a PhD is to make a new or novel contribution to knowledge. And so you've got these 3 studies now, and I'm really wondering what are you thinking about arguing or putting forward in your conclusion chapter as your main contribution to knowledge? And I'm thinking of that as separate to what you had, a series of dot points and recommendations for policy and parents and whatever. And we can sort of always come up with those maybe a little bit generic. You might want to think a little bit more creatively about those. But what do you think is going to be your statement on what the new contribution to knowledge, or your insight that's novel, that's come from these 3 studies?
I would say my main contribution is that these results show that we need to switch our eyes from the effects of screen itself and look more at like our kids and how our kids are like feeling in general, like what makes the screen so important and so attractive, why they value so much that type of interactions. If there is something else that can be done for making them more like happier in their lives and choosing other type of interactions over screens, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like interventions in like parent-child relationship and enhancing this kind of like interactions between parents and kids and providing more meaningful experiences for children. to make them more interested in other things, not
Well-
just these screens. And
well-
also use these screens for the benefit. Like we don't need to give up on screens. We can just use these for the better.
Yeah. Will you have a theory chapter, a separate theory chapter, or that's not a thing that you, Michael?
No.
I mean, I wouldn't imagine, like, she's going to have a review before the systematic review, which will link to the theories and maybe explain theories a bit like the need deficit hypothesis that she was only briefly able to sort of explain in this situation.
I feel like maybe, sorry, Michael, maybe if you could do a little bit somewhere in the thesis, self-determination theory is working quite well. So if you can have something fairly comprehensive on that somewhere. And then I'd love to see a little bit somewhere just on algorithms and the nature of algorithms. And then maybe in the conclusion where you're coming back to why they're seeing all of this as so blah, 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 and what else do we need to look at? One of the recommendations that I saw was more research on screen time. But maybe you can say what you've discovered is that there's a big gap in the relationship between self-determination, algorithms, and screen time. So at least you're pointing to a new, do you know what I mean? A new area. Otherwise, there's a risk that the findings are a little bit, well, yeah, some of that we sort of already knew.
Yeah. And like Taryn, Roberta was on a paper with her supervisor, Taryn, which was in Nature Human Behavior, and I think it found over 200 systematic reviews and meta-analyses on screen time.
Correct.
Right? And then each of them has like 50 or 100 studies in it. And so
Correct.
your point is very good that more research is not a helpful.
No. But more research with a different angle.
Yeah.
Yes. And the algorithms are so powerful, and we don't know how the algorithms interface with the self-determination theory.
Yeah. That's a good observation. Thank you, Susie.
That's all I have. Good luck. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. Joseph, did you have anything else?
I was wondering, Roberta, if you could just go back to that moderation slide and explain to me why I didn't quite understand why you would expect as need satisfaction goes up, the relationship between the variables would go up. That's all. I just wanted a theoretical account of that.
The one.
I think
The first study or the third one?
Yeah, that one's
that's
fine,
the
Roberta.
one. That
Yeah.
I think it's that one. Yeah.
Or maybe the one about screens, electronic
Roberta,
gaming, and social
no.
media?
The one that you had, go back to the simpler
Yeah, the
one
one you
rather
had is
than.
fine. Now,
Okay.
see how
Okay.
the relationships are going up with increasing need frustration.
So you try to
Yes.
explain this, Roberta. I've got to take, but I'll let you go.
Okay. So can you just do the question again? Because I was grabbing the...
Do you have was this expected? Do you have a theory about why this is happening?
Yes, it was expected. Like I was expecting the need frustration to increase like the effect of need satisfaction in screens, like the direct effect of social-emotional well-being, but also to increase the chances of becoming compulsive screen users. That was like confirmed my hypothesis.
So Joseph, the explanation, James and Emma have done some work on this in alcohol use. An analogy that I use, Roberta, is like, do you remember the studies on rat park, where if you have like an addictive substance like heroin in a rat in a cage, they're quite addicted to it. But if you put them in like rat park, where there's like lots of other stimuli, right, other rats and things to play with, then like the heroin's not as addictive. And this is sort of the same phenomenon that like when someone is satisfied in life, then the effect of games is not as addictive, or social media on the behavior. Like the satisfaction is not as it's not as strong of a pull. But when you need is when you like when the rest of life is need thwarting and you get this like glimmer of sort of satisfaction, you're like all your needs are sort of stuck in this thing. And I think Emma's pointed to that in alcohol use as well. Is that right, Emma?
Yeah, it is right. I mean, it's mostly James's work, but yeah, tied to the same logic. I'm wondering about that picture that you just showed, Roberta, and other ways in which you might test it. Maybe you could tell me how you split those three. Did you split them a priori, or is that an interaction that you're projecting there?
Yeah, that was taken from the moderated mediation analysis output. Like it comes like a calculation for the slow need frustration levels and higher in frustration.
High. So the middle is the average, and
average
top
one.
is 1 or 2 standard
Yeah.
deviations above that.
It's not about standard deviations. Like there was an estimate, and the indirect effect for the above the average and below the average.
But like, how far above or below the average do you need to be in order to be high or low? That's typically where the standard deviation would come in.
Yes, it was based on the mean plus standard deviation, like for
One.
the higher or
Yeah. Okay, good. No, it sounds like you tested that right. It looks good. It, like, just on what you can't tell from the way it's projected there is if those levels are different from each other, because obviously you can eyeball those figures and go, oh, one looks sort of bigger than the other, but what you can tell from the interaction plot is whether they actually are or not. So that might be, yeah, that's just would be cool to make a fuss over if you've really found that.
I think she had a p-value at the bottom that said it was significant for that one, Emma. And the interaction beta value is almost meaningless to most people. Like they don't know what like a 0.3 interaction beta value means. And so like, okay, that plot was probably my suggestion. Presented as a simple.
It's not a bad
so
plot. I just wanted extra info.
I think you're calling for like standard errors, are you, Emma? Like,
Yeah,
Standard
I
errors.
just want to, yeah, I just want to be able to see each of the lines and their standard
If
errors.
the
see if
chair
they're all
may
different.
interrupt
Yeah.
you. So, thank you very much.
you.
If I can suggest, I have a paper with this and I have a caterpillar plot.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so you can just use the caterpillar plot and there you can see if there are significant differences.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay, thank you. And just being conscious of the time, I'd now like to open the discussion for a panel. And I know her if you want to ask something. I knew that. Go ahead.
Did you have self-report measures as well?
For the second study?
Yeah.
Yes, we did. We did.
You've demonized self-report measures. You said self-report measures are bad, wearables are good. Instead of that, you should say there's two different measures. And you need to evaluate how highly related they are and how they relate to some of your outcome variables and things like that. I'm sure there's things from self-report that you can get that you couldn't get from the wearables. And I'm sure there's stuff that you could get. And for me, the critical issue and major contribution to the field is the extent to which the self-report is valid in relation to wearables. I use the word valid in quote, because it's not exactly, if you think of them as two different constructs. Certainly, self-report is more reliable than wearables. So you can't say that their measures are unreliable. Your question is whether they're valid or not whether they're unreliable.
Yeah, possibly. Bridget did her study about it, and she tested the validity and reliability of like compared self-reported measures and objective measures of screen time. I don't recall her results now, but I was not like saying that self-reported measures are bad or non-valid. But for screen time specifically, it doesn't give us the information, some type of information that we need to be able to provide more nuanced recommendations.
What I would love to have it see is you've got two ways. I'd love to see a reciprocal effects kind of model where you have screen time and self-report and see what that does. And I think that would be a potentially important contribution to the field.
Yeah, we can consider
with the data that you've got.
Yeah, especially now that I will probably need like my statistical approach plan because my sample is quite small. So I will probably need to adapt, and that might be an option.
For me, the most important take-home message that you had was the reciprocal effects that you found in study one. You need to highlight that. But all of your discussion was unidirectional. You were looking at the effects of screen time, and yet your major finding was that there's reciprocal effects. And so you need to be looking at the effects of the socio-emotional. If the reciprocal effects is more than just unidirectional.
Yeah, but I would say that my third study, it will say more about this reverse causation because we are trying to understand like why screens are so attractive and why kids with social emotional problem will be more likely to overuse screens. What's going on like behind the scenes?
But let me add to the other people, congratulations on your persistence. I mean, just be persistent through all of those issues.
Thank you.
Yeah,
very
Emma?
much.
I'm really quick because I've
question.
Yeah, no, it's a quick. I just wanted to back up the first part of what Herb was saying there about objective and subjective measures. I do think that there's going to be important utility in both in some of your work, because if your outcome is purely objective, if you only care about minutes watched, then definitely an objective measure is better. But we've just finished running an analysis, like a big one, on about 10,000 Americans, and it showed that controlling for the actual amount that a person watched, the extent to which they thought they watched too much, was a better predictor of their negative outcomes. So there is something about the subjective experience above and beyond that which you can obtain objectively that I think will be valuable.
All right, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. That sounds like a postdoc right there. All right. Thanks very much, everyone here online, for joining. Can I ask Mike, Joseph, and Susie to stay online? Thanks to everybody else. Thanks to Roberta, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just